Tim, you know these tactics. You know this man. This is a slightly different setting, his first criminal trial.
It's a slightly different setting, but he's up to his same old tricks that he's always been up to. You know, when Michael Cohen, it was interesting to me to see Michael Cohen say that he's worried about his own well-being. He told me, I don't know, 2 or 3 months ago, that Trump used to direct him to call up reporters who he suspected of writing unfavorable stories and tell them, you better watch out or we'll do exactly to you what we did to Tim O'Brien. Trump sued me for libel unsuccessfully. And the reason I think Michael was hired, he was hired to be an enforcer for Trump. He wasn't hired to do contract law. And the culture of the Trump organization was built on intimidation and threats and media chutzpah. It wasn't built on brilliant business decisions. And you know, when Andrew mentioned earlier about the similarities here and in mob trials that he, you know, mobsters that he prosecuted, Trump has always fetishized the mobsters. He told me his model for how to behave in court was John Gotti. And the thing he really respected about Gotti was he never wept, and he sat there in court and he looked at the jurors and he looked at the judge with a big F-U on his face. And he admired that deeply. He has already in recent days, and he's repeatedly throughout his career, compared himself favorably to Al Capone, which would be bonkers in any other scenario except for the fact that he says something bonkers every day. But he sees this as a signal of what a bad actor he is. And he's proud of being a bad actor. And I think, you know, the order to show cause that the prosecutors are adding to daily of the threats he's making to members of the court, the judge, et cetera, I really do hope that when Rashan reviews this next week, that he brings the full weight of the law to bear on Trump precisely because he's an ex-president and not actually go lightly because he's an ex-president. But it's even more incumbent on the court in this process to hold Trump accountable. And I don't think fines are going to do it. I think he needs to sit in a cell and ponder the consequences of trying to routinely undermine the rule of law and the judiciary, while also, you know, intimidating all of these average citizens who are part of this process. And there's been this argument that, well, he couldn't get a fair trial in New York because New Yorkers don't like Donald Trump and he's a known quantity here. There is nowhere in the world that he is not known now. There is certainly no other city in the U.S. where he could have a trial and the jurors would know something about him. So the idea of knowing you saw Donald Trump in the park and that's disqualifying is absurd. Like and I think his defense team knows this. And you get these very good glimmers of understanding from the jurors when they're being interviewed during voir dire, exactly what they know. You know, one of the jurors today compared Trump, was of Italian descent, and compared Trump to Berlusconi, which is just on the facts of the matter very accurate. A more accurate comparison probably Mussolini, but at least you get somewhere with Berlusconi. And I think the system has to stand up to this. And he has to be held accountable under the law like anyone else will.
Are you confident he will be?
I'm hopeful he will be. You know, I think confidence in the era we're in right now, you know, he gets a formidable array of judicial and legal breaks that other people don't get. So
why?
I think because he's a former president. I do think that is the animating thing. I think, yes, he's a thug.
I think it's because people are afraid of the consequences. They're afraid that he, I don't know, maybe summon a mob.
I mean,
he already did that.
I think the physical reality is definitely true.
I think they're afraid of politics. He's already making this political. Everything that people are afraid of, whether they'll say it or not. I've been in those rooms. I've been in those rooms in the executive branch of government. The kind of people that go work in at least in the executive branch, I do not know at the state level, are sort of small C conservative. They don't want to take big swings. They don't want to seem political. But it has yielded this. It has yielded a defendant who is so, I mean, we should not mince words. He is at this moment above the law. He has his allies, his closest ally at that network, other than Sean Hannity, smearing jurors who've already been seated.
Right. And
she's gone.
And he should be put in a cell for that. He should be put in a cell and contemplate his behavior. I agree with you that people's fear of physical intimidation or physical harm is a key factor here. But I don't think the 9 members of the Supreme Court are worried about physical intimidation. Yet even at that level, he's getting judicial accommodations that other people don't get. They're taking their time deciding the immunity issue. And I don't think they're taking their time simply because they're worried someone might beat them up outside the Supreme Court. They're taking their time because they place him inside the executive branch of the United States government and think he deserves special treatment because of it.
Vaughn Hilliard, what do you got?
Right. I think if I may jump off of that, Donald Trump over the years here, it doesn't play off of, folks' emotions of, sympathy or sorrow for me. It's more of a riling up of anger. And I just got off the phone a few moments ago with a close ally of Donald Trump, who was telling me that, look, we cannot let this linger in the background. We cannot ignore the fact that this trial is going on. Saying this quote to me, quote, "We want people to watch what's happening. It's the first communist-style show trial to come to America." Donald Trump has never suggested that he is not going to go on the attack against potential jurors, against Michael Cohen, Stormy Daniels, the prosecutors. Look, he's taken everybody on from Jeff Sessions to Kayleigh McEnany literally this winter. And so for Donald Trump, there is one playbook that we have seen him consistently play, and it is the attack playbook. And that is where he was given this grace period till Tuesday morning to show that he would act in a different measure. And we've still got a couple of days till we get to that hearing. But in the meanwhile, he is sitting in the courtroom in real time with potential jurors sitting in front of him and answering questions about him. And there's one, I think the update here, Nicole, is the fact that we now have 2 more seated jurors, so we're back up to 7. And there is one striking moment that played out here in real time, and that was this juror whose posts were brought up dating back to 2016. And I want to read you the quote that she posted on her social media at the time, saying, "Trump is an anathema to anything I was taught about faith." The juror responded, quote, "I should apologize for some of the tone of my post," apologizing to Donald Trump sitting a mere 30 feet away from her. After some back and forth about whether this juror should be able, potential juror should be able to sit in as part of the jury, ultimately Judge Merchan ordered her to be struck. But this is a moment here where Donald Trump in his presidency and post-presidency have drawn strong emotions out of a great number of human beings, and those are coming out, Tim was just laying out there in real time, and folks are even being questioned on the spot in front of Donald Trump about some of those social media posts that his defense attorneys are rightfully and to their ability to bring up inside of the courtroom. But it's very transparent here that this is a difficult process that is playing out.
Hey everyone, MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.